During the Holocaust, Nazi genocide systematically targeted 1.5 million Jewish children, alongside Romani children, disabled children, and others deemed undesirable. Children were murdered immediately upon arrival at death camps. Deemed non-productive, they bypassed selection for forced labor and went directly to gas chambers disguised as showers. SS guards sometimes gave children candy during the walk to calm them. At Auschwitz, Dr. Josef Mengele conducted horrific medical experiments on child twins, injecting chemicals into eyes attempting to change their color, performing surgeries without anesthesia, and deliberately infecting them with diseases. In ghettos, children starved slowly, their growth stunted permanently, bodies consuming their own organs. Some, too weak to cry, lay motionless in streets where their corpses were collected each morning. Babies were thrown alive into burning pits or smashed against walls to save bullets. Few children survived. Those who did often concealed themselves in sewers, forests, or Christian families who risked execution for hiding them. The psychological trauma marked survivors lifelong. Many never regained full cognitive or emotional development. This deliberate annihilation of children represented Nazi ideology's most unforgivable dimension, destroying not just a people but their future generations. The 1858 Bradford sweet poisoning occurred when confectioner Joseph Neal unknowingly used arsenic trioxide instead of daft, a harmless adulterant, powdered gypsum or limestone, commonly mixed with peppermint lozenges to increase weight and profit. Neal's supplier, druggist Charles Hodgson, mistakenly provided 12 pounds of white arsenic instead of daft, stored similarly in his shop. William Goddard, Hodgson's lodger who fetched the substance, was partially blind and grabbed the wrong barrel. The contaminated humbugs, hard candies, contained massive arsenic doses. Some had 200 grains per pound, when just 3 grains could kill an adult. Within hours of the sweets going on sale, purchasers experienced violent gastrointestinal agony, convulsions, and burning sensations. 20 people died, mostly children who consumed multiple sweets, and 200 more suffered severe poisoning. The tragedy sparked Britain's first food safety legislation, the 1860 Adulteration of Food and Drink Act, and established pharmaceutical regulation requiring proper labeling of poisons. Hodgson was charged with manslaughter but died before trial. The incident exposed how routine food adulteration and lax poison storage endangered public health, forever changing how consumables were manufactured and sold in Victorian Britain. During the Great Depression, dance marathons offered prize money ranging from $500 to $5,000, life-changing sums for desperate contestants. Couples danced continuously for weeks, allowed only 15-minute rest breaks every hour. Promoters exploited participants' desperation, creating spectacles of human endurance that attracted paying crowds eager to watch suffering. Contestants developed horrific symptoms, hallucinations from sleep deprivation, bleeding feet from constant motion, kidney problems from dehydration, and psychological breakdowns. Some contestants sleepwalked while their partners dragged them in circles. Medical professionals on site provided minimal care, prioritizing entertainment over welfare. When contestants collapsed unconscious, partners sometimes propped them up to continue. Several deaths occurred from heart failure, exhaustion, or complications from untreated injuries. Homer Morehouse died in 1923 after dancing 87 hours continuously. In 1928, a Seattle marathon resulted in a death that sparked national outrage, leading some states to ban the events. Nevertheless, marathons continued until 1933, with participants enduring increasingly abusive conditions, including derby sprints where last-place couples were eliminated. The phenomenon revealed Depression-era desperation and America's appetite for watching human suffering packaged as entertainment before public conscience finally ended the cruel spectacle. John Babacom Lee, convicted of murdering his employer Emma Keese in 1884, faced execution at Exeter Prison on February 23, 1885. Lee maintained his innocence despite circumstantial evidence. Executioner James Barry prepared the gallows, testing the trapdoor mechanism successfully that morning with sandbags equivalent to Lee's weight. When Lee stood on the trap with the noose around his neck, Barry pulled the lever, but the trapdoor refused to open. Officials removed Lee, retested the mechanism, which worked perfectly. They returned Lee to the gallows. Again, the trap failed. After adjusting the apparatus once more and successfully testing it, they positioned Lee a third time. Again, nothing. Prison officials, increasingly disturbed, deemed divine intervention at work and postponed execution pending Home Office consultation. Engineers later theorized that Lee's weight, concentrated on specific boards, caused them to bind slightly against the framework, while distributed sandbag weight during testing didn't replicate this effect. The Home Secretary commuted Lee's death sentence to life imprisonment, citing the extraordinary circumstances. Lee served 22 years, was released, and lived until 1945. He became known as the man they couldn't hang, his case contributing to growing opposition to capital punishment in Britain. On October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 crashed into the Andes Mountains carrying 45 passengers, mostly young rugby players. Survivors faced sub-zero temperatures at 12,000 feet altitude with virtually no food, sparse wreckage, shelter, and no rescue prospects after search efforts ceased. After 10 days of starvation, facing death, survivors made an agonizing decision: consume flesh from deceased passengers preserved in snow. Roberto Canessa and others reasoned that if they died, they'd want their bodies used similarly. They began with small pieces, praying first, treating the act with reverence rather than desperation. The meat, frozen solid, required cutting with glass shards from the airplane. This sustenance kept 16 survivors alive through 72 days of extreme conditions, avalanches that killed 8 more, and dwindling hope. When Roberto Canessa and Nando Parado finally trekked 10 days through impossible terrain to reach civilization, rescuing the remaining 14, they faced explaining their survival. Upon returning home, they confronted families of the deceased and worldwide media. The Catholic Church granted absolution, acknowledging the moral complexity. The survivors formed lifelong bonds, annually commemorating both the tragedy and their controversial choice that ensured some lived to tell the story. The 1918 influenza pandemic, misleadingly called Spanish flu, infected 500 million people, 1/3 of Earth's population, killing 50 to 100 million worldwide, far exceeding World War I casualties. The virus attacked with unprecedented ferocity, often killing healthy young adults within 24 hours through cytokine storms that filled lungs with fluid, causing victims to drown internally while developing heliotrope cyanosis, a distinctive purple-blue skin discoloration from oxygen deprivation. Hospitals overflowed with dying patients gasping for air, blood pouring from noses and ears. Morgues couldn't accommodate bodies, which accumulated in hallways, homes, and warehouses. Mass graves were excavated with steam shovels, bodies buried in layers or stacked in trenches with quicklime. Philadelphia had 4,500 corpses awaiting burial at the peak. Gravediggers worked around the clock, often collapsing from exhaustion or infection themselves. Some communities ran out of coffins, burying victims in sheets or stacking multiple bodies per casket. Entire families died within days, orphaning thousands of children. The disease's rapid mortality overwhelmed normal funeral practices, grief rituals, and death documentation. Many victims were buried anonymously, records lost or never created, explaining why this catastrophic pandemic, killing more than both world wars combined, remains relatively forgotten in collective memory. Before penicillin's discovery in 1928, syphilis treatment involved deliberate mercury poisoning through the medical principle, a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Physicians administered mercury through various horrific methods, rubbing mercury ointments into skin until absorbed, inhaling mercury vapor in fumigation chambers, or injecting mercury compounds directly into lesions. Patients endured hypersalivation so severe they produced quarts of saliva daily, requiring spittoons constantly nearby. Teeth loosened and fell out, gums blackened and receded, and jawbones necrotized, sometimes requiring surgical removal. Kidney damage caused agonizing urination, while neurological mercury poisoning produced tremors, personality changes, and psychosis. Physicians often couldn't distinguish between syphilitic and mercury-induced madness. The salivation cure required weeks of treatment with patients confined to mercury rooms. breathing toxic vapors until symptoms temporarily improved or mercury poisoning became life-threatening. Many died from the cure rather than the disease. Alternative treatments included arsenic compounds like salvarsan, also highly toxic. This nightmarish standard continued for centuries, with physicians genuinely believing they helped patients despite obvious harm. Only penicillin's arrival ended this barbaric practice, though mercury's medical use persisted in some remedies until the 1950s. Commodus, Roman emperor from 180 to 192 CE, survived an increasingly paranoid reign marked by gladiatorial obsessions and megalomaniacal behavior. He fought in the Colosseum hundreds of times, believing himself the reincarnation of Hercules, and renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself. Multiple assassination conspiracies failed, including one led by his sister Lucilla, whose participants were executed. By 192 CE, his erratic behavior and murderous purges terrified the palace. On December 31st, his mistress Marcia attempted poisoning him with wine, but Commodus vomited the toxin. Conspirators panicked, knowing their plot was likely discovered. They summoned Narcissus, a champion wrestler and the emperor's training partner. Finding Commodus weakened from the poison and relaxing in his bath, Narcissus strangled him, the emperor too debilitated to resist effectively. His death ended the Nerva Antonine dynasty and plunged Rome into civil war, known as the Year of the Five Emperors. Commodus was 31 years old. The Senate immediately condemned his memory, ordering his statues destroyed and Rome's name restored. His body was initially denied burial honors, though later interred in Hadrian's mausoleum, ending one of Rome's most deranged reigns. Among Titanic legends, the unlucky mummy tale claimed an Egyptian priestess's mummy case aboard caused the 1912 disaster. The artifact in question, a 21st dynasty mummy board of Amun-Ra's priestess housed in the British Museum, supposedly brought misfortune to every owner. Photographers died mysteriously, translators suffered accidents, and purchasers experienced financial ruin. Journalist William Stead, aboard Titanic and lost in the sinking, had written about the cursed mummy. Fueling speculation, it traveled with him. The British Museum repeatedly denied the artifact ever left its collection, providing documentation proving it remained in London throughout 1912. Nevertheless, the myth persisted, amplified by spiritualists and newspaper sensationalism. Some claimed the mummy case's painted face possessed evil powers that could project curses across distances, while others insisted it was secretly smuggled aboard. This superstition reflected broader Edwardian-era fascination with Egyptology and occultism, where ancient artifacts were believed to carry supernatural vengeance. The cursed mummy story provided a supernatural explanation for the disaster, more comforting to some than acknowledging human error, inadequate lifeboats, and tragic coincidence. The actual mummy board remains harmlessly displayed, though some visitors still report unsettling feelings in its presence. Crinolines, cage-like structures of steel hoops worn under skirts during the 1850s to 1860s, created the fashionable bell-shaped silhouette but proved catastrophically dangerous. These wide frameworks measured up to 6 feet in diameter, forcing women to navigate carefully around fireplaces, candles, and gas lamps that dominated Victorian interiors. The lightweight fabric draped over crinolines caught fire with terrifying ease, and once ignited, flames raced upward through the layered petticoats and dresses. The voluminous garments created a chimney effect, intensifying the fire while the rigid hoops prevented quick removal. Panicked women couldn't escape their own clothing, becoming human torches. An estimated 3,000 women died in crinoline fires during the fashion's peak. Notable victims included 18-year-old Margaret Davy, who burned to death after her dress caught fire while she admired herself in a mirror. Charles Dickens's sister-in-law suffered this fate, as did numerous factory workers whose crinolines snagged on machinery and pulled them into flames. Despite mounting deaths, fashion magazines rarely acknowledge the danger, instead offering futile advice about fire-resistant fabrics and careful movement around flames. John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown for performing at children's parties, murdered 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978. He lured victims to his Des Plaines, Illinois ranch house with promises of construction work, or by impersonating a police officer. After sexually assaulting and torturing them, Gacy strangled his victims with a tourniquet device he called his rope trick. He buried 26 bodies in the dirt crawl space beneath his home, pouring quicklime over corpses to accelerate decomposition and mask the overwhelming stench. As the space filled, he began disposing of bodies in the Des Plaines River. Neighbors occasionally complained of mysterious sewage odors, which Gacy blamed on moisture problems. His arrest came after the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peast, whose mother insisted on investigation. When police executed a search warrant, they discovered the crawl space, horror, layers of decomposing remains in various stages of decay, some bodies stacked atop others. The excavation required removing Gacy's entire house foundation. Forensic teams worked for months identifying victims through dental records, with several remaining unidentified for decades. During the Victorian era, Shields green and Paris green wallpapers became fashionable for their vibrant emerald hues, achieved through copper arsenite compounds. When exposed to dampness or attacked by mold, these wallpapers released arsenic trihydride gas, a colorless, deadly vapor that accumulated in poorly ventilated rooms. Families experienced mysterious illnesses, chronic headaches, convulsions, digestive agony, and gradual organ failure. Children playing on floors near affected walls suffered disproportionately as the heavier gas settled downward. Some historians believe Napoleon Bonaparte died from arsenic poisoning due to green wallpaper in his St. Helena exile quarters. The poisoning was insidious because symptoms mimicked other Victorian-era ailments like tuberculosis or cholera. By the 1860s, medical journals documented thousands of deaths linked to arsenical wallpapers, yet manufacturers denied responsibility for decades. Removal of the wallpaper was itself hazardous, releasing concentrated arsenic dust. The scandal eventually led to public outcry and gradual elimination of arsenic from decorative materials, but not before countless victims suffered painful, mysterious deaths in their own ornately decorated homes. Sophie Blanchard, wife of pioneering balloonist Jean-Pierre Blanchard, became Napoleon's chief of air service and the first woman to work as a professional balloonist. On July 6, 1819, she ascended from the Tivoli Gardens in Paris during a fireworks exhibition. Her balloon illuminated with Bengal lights for spectacle. As she floated above the crowd, the hydrogen-filled balloon ignited, likely from sparks produced by her own fireworks display. Witnesses watched in horror as flames consumed the envelope, causing a rapid descent. Blanchard plummeted from approximately 900 feet, crashing onto the roof of a house on the Rue de Provence. Her body was found tangled in the netting of her basket, neck broken from the impact. She was 41 years old. Despite her death, Blanchard had pioneered nighttime aerial displays and parachute demonstrations, making over 60 ascents during her career. Her tragic end highlighted the extreme dangers early aeronauts faced while entertaining crowds with increasingly spectacular performances. Travis, a 200-pound, 14-year-old chimpanzee raised from infancy by Sandra Harold, lived domestically in Stamford, Connecticut, sleeping in a bed, using the toilet, and dining at the table. On February 16, 2009, Travis attacked Harold's friend Charla Nash without warning. Nash had helped lure Travis back inside after he escaped. Harold desperately stabbed Travis with a butcher knife and hit him with a shovel, but he ignored her. Travis tore off Nash's hands, nose, lips, eyelids, and facial bones, inflicting injuries so severe first responders were initially unsure of the victim's gender. The attack lasted approximately 12 minutes until police arrived. When Travis attacked their cruiser, Officer Frank Chiafari shot him multiple times. Travis retreated into Harold's house, dying from gunshot wounds. Nash survived but required a face transplant, remains blind, and lost both hands. Investigators theorize Travis's violence resulted from being given Xanax for agitation that day, combined with primate maturity bringing natural aggression. The incident highlighted dangers of keeping adult chimpanzees as pets. They possess 5 times human strength and unpredictable aggression. Connecticut subsequently banned private primate ownership. Nash's case became emblematic of exotic pet dangers and prompted federal legislation restricting primate possession.